Welcome to another episode of Straight from the Desk. This time we will paint something quite different to the rest of the model. We will paint heavily rusted surfaces. And I think this is a wonderful topic because you can use it in like a lot of different projects. But yeah, let's see how we approach that. Alright, so here we are with the front part actually almost done. And yeah, you can see we still have like all the back part to do. I want to have like these parts here in like quite a different material than the rest of the armor with the digital camo. So we'll also start quite differently because I want these parts to be more heavily rusted. So we'll first start with like a nice dark brown tone. So you can see on the palette we have some Schminke titanium white, some orange rust from Secret Weapons, and some Ammo brown from the Model Air range, and also some black from Model Color. So we will start with just a tiny bit of the orange, some of the Ammo brown, some black, okay, and we will use this here in something between a heavy layer consistency and a light base consistency. So the foundation is still shining through a bit. And you can see, because it's so translucent, it really nicely gathers in the recesses. And we can still see like what we did with the black and white foundation. Okay, we'll let that dry and we'll be back for the next step. So you can see the base layer is dry and we can continue with the next step. Okay, for the next step we need a bit of sponge. Here this is actually a makeup removal sponge, and I just took off here the sides using a plier to get like a little bit more a jagged edge, and we'll use that here in the back of the model. On the palette you can see we're taking plenty of the orange rust here and mixing it to the side with our brown base tone. Adding a bit of black. Okay, so we're taking the sponge and we're just dabbing it here in the paint, and you can see when we dab it on the palette, it gives us a nice bit of texture. So we'll just carefully here just dab along the whole surface to create like a very irregular, dramatic rust effect. Okay, we see the difference in tone is just not strong enough, so we're just taking some of the pure orange rust, just dabbing that here. Okay, I think that's already good. We give that a second to dry and we'll be back to see how it looks. Alright, so you can see the texture effect is actually really cool, but I didn't reach really the top side of it with the sponge because it was a little bit too careful to not stain the other parts, so we have to continue there. First with the sponge, and after that we'll also go in there with the brush. So I guess for the sponge work this should be alright. You can see here on the back of the palette I added a bit of the Army Painter Strong Tone. Thin it down a bit. And apply a layer of that on the surface to get like all these little panel lines back. And you can see here how you can really push it nicely into the edges and let it dry there. Okay. Alright, now that the strong tone is dry, you can see we gained a lot of the definition back, and we have a really super random rust effect. So, and it was actually quite a fast progress, so I think that is also something that you can really nicely use for something heavily rusted on a tank or a Nurgle drone. So you can see on the palette I've added a bit of model color dark sea blue because I want the paint that chipped off of these parts to be like in a nicely contrasted color. So I'm mixing some black, dark sea blue, and some of the Schmincke titanium white. And the paint is quite thick in consistency, so we're working with between medium and heavy base color. And we will use that. Here I'm using a Winsor & Newton size 2, and we will just dab the paint on that is still left on the surface. So we will just carefully, we could also do that with a sponge, but here I prefer to have like more control. We'll continue with the same color here on this part. And we're actually doing it like a little bit the other way around than we did it on the front part of on the light material, where we just had like our dark brown chips that we painted on later, and here we're just painting the remaining paint. So we're also leaving it off from like the edges. Okay, so in here we would still definitely have some paint. Okay, so this is how we would proceed with also other chipped off paints, but we still need to do like a little bit of highlighting work, so we'll add some white here to our mix. And we're now using it a bit thinner so we can actually blend a bit on the surface. So now just trying to highlight like the upper ones here a little bit Also not too bright because we still need like a little bit room for our highlights. Okay, and the darker base tone. Just blending the two here together. And it doesn't need to be super clean, as we will have like layers of rust overlapping with that anyway, so you should make sure that like the ones that are on the same height level also get like the same kind of gray. Okay, just feather that out a little bit with a clean brush. Okay, and some stronger highlights using more white and also a bit more thicker paint. And we will try to highlight just like the small bits of paint that could be raised, or that would catch the light. So okay, the one here on the lower side was definitely too big. Okay, I switched the brush. I'm now working with a Winsor & Newton miniature series with a 00. Really small, but I want to get like also finer highlights here. Alright, looks interesting, but it looks not really 100% as I want. But that's it in miniature painting, so that's in between. It doesn't look like how you expect it to look in the like the finished result. But with like practice, you will know that okay, relax. This is just, it's gonna look alright in the end. So here I will just add like a darker scratch using the dark brown. So adding like a tiny bit of shadow here underneath some of the bigger patches of paint. Okay. Some highlights. Okay. And to bring everything more together, we will continue with glazes of the orange rust. So you can see I switched back to the big brush and just putting some of the orange rust in the front of the brush tip and having water in the back of the brush. So we will use that here on the edge and just feather it out with the water directly. And again, we're continuing with leaking rust as we did also on the front. So consistency wise, we're working with like a between medium and light layer consistency, and because of the water in the back of the brush, the consistency is changing once I place it down. It gets thinner and thinner. Here I'm just trying to do like vertical lines of like water and rust just running down on the surface here. Alright, so you can see now the whole thing looks completely different than just a minute ago. So I'll continue like that. I really want to focus the heavily rusted part here on the engine part with the exhaust, because you know sometimes the exhaust heats up like crazy and all the paint chips off, and it's more intense than on the other parts. Also, it suggests that the materials could have different ages, and like, he's been wearing that part a lot longer than some of the other parts. So let me just continue with like the gray armor part here in the front, and we'll be back for the other parts. Okay, so you can see I continued with the blue bits here, and let's continue with another color. So you can see here on the back of the palette I added some old matte from the Secret Weapon range and some ivory to remix like the base color of our front armor as well. And we will use that quite thick, so in something like a medium base consistency. And I want this plate here to be in that beige part. And I think it's quite nice to see it actually with something like a bright color like that. This gives you really a lot of contrast, and you really see all these shippings a lot better. So okay, and we will do like the same color to some other places, like the top here and also here along that side. So I think here I want them really just to be here also, only on the upper edge here, and here where we have more heat towards the exhaust we only have just like a little bit of the paint left. Alright, so you can see I've continued with the white patches of paint. I also continued here with some highlights. We still need to do the highlights here. So same as before. Okay, so I've zoomed in a little. Taking the small brush again, and we're adding some ivory here to our base color, and highlighting the upper edge of each of these small patches. Okay, up here we can just use a little bit thinner paint to indicate the highlight. Okay, so very same approach as before. Highlights always on the top edge of each of these elements. Okay, I think that should be okay for the highlights on the lower side. But let's continue here first with some glazes of the strong tone. If you remember correctly, we've used strong tone also on these plates here, so just to get them in, like tonal wise in the same direction. So to introduce here some shadow tones. Okay, let that dry. Okay. Okay, I think that should already be okay actually. So we let that dry and we'll be back for some of the orange rust. Okay, now I'm back for some leaking rust. You can see I've a clean brush and just some of the orange rust on the tip again. And apply that here. Quite strong. I also did like quite a strong orange impact here on this side. And with like the mixed color that I still have in the brush, I can also just pull like a few streaks here to indicate the leaking rust. Also here for sure on the lower side. We'll just mix like a light glaze from the orange. See, it's really quite thin. And we're using that just to get like a tint of orange here. It's more heavily rusted here on the lower side. And I'm just pushing it here into the shadow area. Okay, we give that a second to dry. Okay, now that it's dry, we can continue with smaller, more local areas of rust. So here on that small hatch, for example. really want quite a bit of rust here around the exhaust, so I'm also just dabbing a bit of the orange brown just here around that, and also here in the recess, so it really gathered there. And I'm continuing with the same method here on this part. And that dabbing motion will lead to like just a different way of how the pigments settle, and it will just look a bit more, I don't know, like watercolor marks or the coffee stains that you actually want to avoid, but here it gives us quite a nice bit of rust effect. So here on the top. Okay, so we let that dry and decide if we're happy. And I think I would like to add like a little bit of like a some rest of smoke or some umber just around here, the exhaust. I think we're already good to go. The color seems to be dry, so we're just taking some black here, thin it down, and we switch to just some of the strong tone. I will just put the strong tone down on the surface here. Okay, clean the brush and feather it out here to the top. And when this is still wet, we can just add a bit of our thinned down black here to the front. And just mix it with the strong tone on the surface. Okay, let that dry and check how it looks. Okay, so it didn't turn out like I wanted it to be, so I think I'm just adding a bit of white here to the black to get like a dark gray, and glaze that here over the exhaust. Clean the brush and feather it out. Yeah, I think now it starts to really look like how I want it to be, so just adding a bit more white here. Wipe off the brush a little, and then just adding here a tiny bit of a grayish highlight in there. And here I'm just cleaning it off, so get like that nice grayish transition. Okay, I think maybe just here, like a little bit of orange again in there, and then we should be good to go. Alright, so yeah, this is how our heavily rusted machine part looks. For the rest of the armor here, we will continue like in a more traditional way, so we get like a nice bridge between that kind of rusted and this kind of rusted. So I will paint the base colors on the west just like I did in the front, and we'll be back for the small elements. Alright, let's do a little sum up of how we approach heavily rusted surfaces. So first start with a dark red-brown base color, then use a sponge to create textures in various orange-brown shades. After that, you apply a wash to gain back the definition of the details. Now paint on some patches of paint that have not rusted away. Add highlights and a few shadows to those patches. Redefine the shadows using a dark wash, and add leaking rust where it will culminate. Okay, now that the heavily rusted part is painted, you can see it looks quite different than the rest. So I will just finish the plates like I did before in the front, and we'll be back for the details. Okay, hope you enjoyed it.